In the bitter autumn of 1839, along the treacherous trail of tears, one family's broken promise would forever alter the fate of a young woman and a proud Cherokee warrior whose paths were never meant to cross. What began as a moment of utter despair for Sarah Bennett would blossom into a love story that would not only heal to wounded souls, but would ultimately save an entire nation fighting for its very survival. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The charcoal portrait of Elizabeth Bennett hung slightly askew on the cabin wall, its frame weathered by years of handling during the family's constant relocations. The woman in the drawing had kind eyes, the same eyes her daughter Sarah had inherited, along with her mother's stubborn determination and healing hands. Sarah knelt beside the hearth, carefully arranging the meager bundle of herbs she'd gathered that morning, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to be useful without drawing attention. At 22, Sarah Bennett had mastered the art of invisibility in a household dominated by her father's increasingly desperate schemes. The death of her mother from fever 3 winters ago had taken more than Elizabeth Bennett's life. It had stolen away the steadying influence that once kept William Bennett's reckless ambitions in check. The Bennett family had once been respected merchants in Charleston, with a prosperous general store that served both settlers and neighboring Cherokee. William Bennett had prided himself on fair dealings with everyone, regardless of heritage. Elizabeth had been known for her knowledge of both European and indigenous medicine, often trading remedies with Cherokee healers and earning their trust and friendship. Their modest home had been filled with books, the scent of Elizabeth's healing, herbs, and visitors from all walks of life seeking either goods or medical attention. Those days seemed like another lifetime now. The forced removal of the Cherokee Nation from their ancestral lands in Georgia had created chaos throughout the region. While many whites celebrated access to former Cherokee territories, the Bennett family had opposed the removal. Elizabeth's closest friend and medicine-teaching companion had been a Cherokee healer named Aida, who had taught her traditional plant knowledge in exchange for reading lessons. When the soldiers came to force the Cherokee westward, on what would become known as the Trail of Tears, the Bennetts had tried to help their friends. This act of conscience had marked them as Indian lovers and led to their ostracism from Charleston society rather than abandon their principles. They had relocated to a small settlement near the Tennessee-North Carolina border, where William established a smaller trading post. Sarah remembered the exact moment she realized her father was changing. It was 2 months after her mother's funeral when she found him hunched over account books. Late at night, a bottle of whiskey opened beside him, his face contorted with worry. As he calculated and recalculated figures that wouldn't balance, "The new supplier is charging twice what Thompson used to ask," he had muttered, not realizing Sarah stood in the doorway. "And half the town won't trade with Cherokee sympathizers. I don't know how to keep this business afloat, Lizzie," he had said, addressing his dead wife as though she still sat beside him. "I don't know how to make this work without you." That was the night Sarah began shouldering more responsibility. The transition wasn't immediate. Initially, William would rally for weeks at a time, securing new merchandise, negotiating with suppliers, and maintaining the cheerful demeanor essential for a shopkeeper. But grief and financial pressure eroded his resilience like floodwaters, undermining a riverbank. The first significant sign of trouble came when Sarah discovered loan documents hidden beneath the store ledger. Small amounts at first, money borrowed from the new territorial bank at interest rates that made her stomach clench with anxiety. William had explained them away as temporary measures to weather difficult times. "Every business needs capital, Sarah," he had said with forced confidence. "Once we establish ourselves properly in this new location, we'll repay everything with profit to spare." Sarah had wanted to believe him. She needed to believe someone was in control of their increasingly precarious circumstances. But as winter approached and trade slowed to a trickle, she watched her father's expressions shift from worried determination to desperate calculation. She took over more of the shop's daily operations, using the bookkeeping skills her mother had insisted she learn. Sarah managed inventory, handled correspondence, and developed relationships with the few customers willing to trade with them. Several were mixed-blood Cherokee who had somehow avoided removal, living in isolated mountain communities and risking discovery to obtain necessary supplies. From them, Sarah learned that thousands of Cherokee had died on the forced march west. Disease, exposure, and starvation had claimed nearly a quarter of the entire nation. The survivors were attempting to establish a new homeland in Indian Territory, but faced tremendous hardships. These stories strengthened Sarah's resolve to help however she could, honoring her mother's commitment to a people the government had determined to destroy. As their financial situation deteriorated, William began seeking increasingly risky opportunities. He started trading in questionable goods with origins he refused to discuss, staying away for days at a time and returning with merchandise that Sarah suspected might be stolen. When she questioned him, he grew defensive. "You don't understand the realities of business, girl," he snapped during one confrontation. "Sometimes a man has to bend the rules to keep food on the table." Sarah watched helplessly as their small home, once a place of healing and learning, became filled with tension and secrets. The books her mother had cherished gathered dust, while William's collection of whiskey bottles grew. The garden of medicinal herbs Elizabeth had maintained so carefully became overgrown with weeds. As Sarah struggled to manage both household and store alone, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Josephine Blackwell, the local midwife who had been Elizabeth's friend, tried to intervene. She would visit unannounced, bringing food and concerned advice about William's increasingly erratic behavior. "Your mother would want better for you than this, child," Josephine said during one visit, watching Sarah attempt to organize merchandise that William had brought home in the middle of the night. "There are respectable families in town who would hire you as a governess or companion. You have education and good manners. Father needs me." Sarah replied simply, "The Bennett family takes care of its own," but they weren't taking care of themselves. Sarah was holding everything together, while William ventured into increasingly dangerous trading schemes. The territorial authorities, initially indifferent to the Bennett family's struggles, began paying attention as William's activities crossed into smuggling territory. Sarah overheard whispers at the general store about her father's association with men known for trafficking goods through Cherokee lands without paying territorial taxes. "Poor Sarah," Mrs. Wilson had murmured to the storekeeper. "That girl's trying to maintain respectability while her father courts prison or worse. Someone ought to intervene." But in 1839, a woman's options were severely limited, especially one whose family reputation was tarnished. Sarah was trapped, watching her father's desperate decisions destroy everything their family had built, while she struggled to maintain the fiction that all was well. The devastating blow to their precarious situation came on a rain-soaked evening in late October. Sarah was preparing a simple supper when her father burst through the door, soaked to the skin and wild-eyed with panic. "Pack only what you can. Carry," he ordered, pulling a battered trunk from beneath his bed. "We leave within the hour." "Father, what's happened?" Sarah asked, her heart pounding with sudden fear. "A misunderstanding with business associates," William replied, stuffing clothing haphazardly into the trunk. "Nothing that can't be resolved, but we need to relocate temporarily." Sarah had learned to recognize her father's evasions. "Tell me the truth," she insisted, blocking his frantic movements. "What kind of trouble are we in?" William's shoulders slumped in defeat. In that moment, he seemed to age a decade, the lines in his face deepening into crevices of despair. "I borrowed money," he admitted, "significant money, from men who don't forgive debts. I thought I could double it through a trade opportunity quality European goods to the new Cherokee settlements in the West. The profit margins were substantial." "What went wrong?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. "The shipment was seized at the territorial border, everything confiscated. The authorities claimed the trading permits were forged." He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "The investment is gone, but the debt remains, with interest." Sarah felt cold dread spreading through her body. "How much do you owe, Father?" $2,000, he whispered. "Due in 3 days. The sum was staggering more than their store would earn in 2 years of good business. And if you can't pay? William's face contorted with anguish. These aren't men who accept excuses, Sarah. They take what they're owed, one way or another. Then we'll sell everything. Sarah said with desperate practicality. The store inventory. The property. It wouldn't be enough. William interrupted. And they won't wait for a proper sale. They're coming tomorrow to collect whatever they can find of value. Sarah thought quickly, mentally cataloging their remaining possessions. Mother's silver service, her jewelry. William's expression told her everything before he spoke. Already sold or traded. There's nothing left, Sarah, nothing except. His voice trailed off, and he couldn't meet her eyes. A terrible understanding dawned. Accept me, she finished quietly. You've offered me as payment. William flinched as though she had struck him, not directly. But Silas Crawford, their leader, has a trading post in Indian Territory. He mentioned needing someone with education and bookkeeping skills to manage his accounts. When I couldn't offer money, I suggested a labor arrangement. You sold me into servitude to cover your gambling debts, Sarah stated flatly, her voice unnaturally calm despite the storm raging within her. It's a legitimate position. William protested weakly. Crawford operates the largest trading post in the western Cherokee nation. You'd have food, shelter, protection, as a debt servant to men who threatened you. Sarah finished. How long would I serve? William stared at the floor. 5 years. 5 years of her life signed away without her knowledge or consent. 5 years among strangers in a dangerous frontier territory. 5 years separated from everything familiar, with no guarantee that Crawford would honor the arrangement or treat her with any decency. When do they come for me? Sarah asked, her mind already calculating possibilities for escape, though she knew there were few. Tomorrow at noon, William replied, his voice breaking. Sarah, if there were any other way, there were 1,000 other ways, she interrupted, a lifetime of suppressed anger finally breaking through. You could have lived honestly. You could have worked harder. You could have respected Mother's memory instead of destroying everything she valued. William recoiled as though physically struck. I was trying to provide for us, to rebuild what we lost. You were trying to recapture what's gone forever, Sarah said. And tomorrow I'll pay the price for your failures. She turned away from him then, walking with measured steps to her small bedroom. Once inside, she closed the door quietly and leaned against it, allowing silent tears to fall only when she was certain he couldn't hear her. Through the thin walls, she heard William resume his frantic packing. He would run tonight, she realized. Having sold his daughter to settle his debts, he wouldn't even remain to face the consequences of his actions or to bid her farewell. Sarah wiped her tears and began to think practically. If she was to be taken tomorrow, she needed to prepare. She would face whatever came with the dignity and strength her mother had taught her. Elizabeth Bennett had endured social ostracism and financial hardship without losing her compassion or integrity. Sarah would honor that example, regardless of her circumstances. She carefully packed her mother's medical journal, containing years of notes on both European and Cherokee healing practices. She added her own small notebook of remedies, a cherished volume of Shakespeare's sonnets, and the few practical clothes she possessed. If she was to serve as a bookkeeper in a frontier trading post, she would need her writing implements and ledger skills. Most importantly, she packed her mother's small collection of medicinal herbs and seeds. Whatever happened, Sarah was determined to continue Elizabeth's healing work. It was the one connection to her mother that couldn't be sold or traded away. As dawn broke over the mountains, Sarah was not surprised to discover that William had left during the night. His room was empty except for the items too worthless to carry worn clothing, chipped crockery, and the portrait of Elizabeth that had once been his most treasured possession. Sarah placed the portrait carefully in her bundle. She would not abandon her mother's memory as easily as William had abandoned his daughter. At precisely noon, 3 riders approached the Bennett property. Sarah watched their arrival from the front porch where she stood with her small bundle of possessions, dressed in her most practical traveling clothes. She had spent the morning securing the house and store, covering furniture with sheets and closing shutters against the weather. Whatever happened to her, She would leave with the knowledge that she had behaved responsibly until the end. The leader of the group was immediately identifiable, a tall, broad-shouldered man with the hard eyes of someone accustomed to taking what he wanted without permission. He dismounted with casual confidence, surveying the property with the calculating gaze of a man assessing assets. "Miss Bennett, I presume," he said, removing his hat with mocking politeness. "I'm Silas Crawford. I believe your father discussed an arrangement with you." "My father discussed nothing with me," Sarah replied evenly, "but I'm aware of the agreement he made on my behalf." Crawford's eyebrows rose slightly at her directness. "Then you understand you'll be coming with us to Indian Territory to fulfill his obligation." "I understand that my father traded me like property to settle his debts," Sarah said. "I'm prepared to honor his commitment, despicable though it may be." Crawford studied her with increased interest. Most women would be hysterical at the prospect. "Hysteria serves no practical purpose," Sarah replied. "Will we be departing immediately?" Crawford nodded to one of his companions, who brought forward a fourth horse. "Your mount. Miss Bennett, I trust you can ride." "My mother taught me," Sarah said, approaching the horse with careful confidence. It was a decent animal, well-groomed, and properly saddled, better treatment than she had expected from men who trafficked in debt servitude. As she secured her bundle to the saddle, Crawford looked around the property. "Where is William? I expected him to at least bid his daughter farewell." "My father left during the night," Sarah replied without emotion. "He's not a man who faces the consequences of his actions." Something like disgust flickered across Crawford's face. "I see. Well, we have a 3-week journey ahead. We'll stop in Knoxville to supply properly before heading west." Sarah mounted her horse with practiced ease, settling herself for what she knew would be a grueling journey. As they rode away from the only home she had known since her mother's death, she refused to look back. That chapter of her life was closed. Whatever awaited her in Indian Territory would be the beginning of something new. Whether for good or ill, the journey west was arduous, but not as terrible as Sarah had feared. Crawford and his men Miller and Johnson treated her with gruff respect, neither threatening nor particularly accommodating. They established clear expectations. She would keep up with their pace, help with camp chores, and avoid causing complications. In return, they would ensure she reached her destination safely. On their 4th night, as they camped outside a small Tennessee settlement, Sarah gathered the courage to ask Crawford directly about her future. "What exactly will my duties entail at your trading post?" she asked as they sat around the campfire. Crawford considered her question seriously. "Primarily bookkeeping and correspondence. I trade with both settlers and Cherokee, which requires meticulous record-keeping to avoid misunderstandings. You'll also manage inventory and help with English speaking, customers, and my living arrangements. There's a small cabin behind the main trading post, previously occupied by my former bookkeeper before he returned east. Basic but private. You'll take meals with my household." The arrangement sounded more reasonable than Sarah had expected, which made her suspicious. "And will I be permitted to leave the property, to correspond with others?" Crawford's expression hardened slightly. "You're not a prisoner, Miss Bennett, but neither are you a free employee. Your father's debt purchases 5 years of your service. During that time, you go nowhere without my knowledge and permission." Sarah nodded, understanding the limitations of her position. "And after 5 years, the debt is paid. What you do then is your concern." Crawford added another log to the fire. "I should mention that my trading post is located near the settlement of Tahlequah, within Cherokee Nation territory. It's not Charleston or even Knoxville. Life there requires adjustment for most whites." "My mother counted several Cherokee among her closest friends," Sarah replied. "I grew up learning their language and customs alongside my own." Crawford looked genuinely surprised. "That's unusual and potentially useful in our business." As they traveled further west, crossing into territories increasingly distant from settled white communities, Sarah observed subtle changes in their party's dynamics. Crawford began consulting maps more frequently and posting guards during their overnight camps. Twice they altered their route based on information from travelers they encountered. "Is there danger ahead?" Sarah asked after One such change of direction. There's always danger in these territories, Crawford replied vaguely. Particularly for traders like ourselves. Sarah suspected he wasn't telling her everything, but she was learning to read between the lines of Crawford's statements. He was involved in more than legitimate trading, smuggling most likely, possibly supplying weapons or liquor to territories where such items were restricted. 2 weeks into their journey, as they made camp near the Mississippi River, Sarah's suspicions were confirmed. Crawford received a visitor after nightfall, a rough-looking man who spoke in hushed tones, and delivered a sealed message. After reading it, Crawford's expression grew grim. Change of plans, he informed his men. We need to avoid the main crossing. Federal agents are inspecting all traffic. That adds 3 days to our journey, Miller protested. Better 3 days late than imprisoned, Crawford snapped. That night, Sarah overheard fragments of conversation that confirmed her worst fears. Crawford wasn't simply a trader. With questionable methods, he was deeply involved in illegal activities that carried serious consequences, and she was now irrevocably tied to his operation. As they continued westward, the landscape changed dramatically. The dense forests and rolling hills of Tennessee gave way to broader vistas of Oklahoma territory. Sarah found unexpected beauty in the open plains and distant horizons, so different from the enclosed mountain valleys she had known all her life. Their party grew increasingly cautious as they approached Cherokee territory. Crawford explained that relationships between the newly relocated Cherokee and white traders were complex and sometimes hostile. Many blame all whites for their forced removal, he told Sarah. Not without reason. Thousands died on the journey west. Those who survived are rebuilding, but the wounds are fresh. Yet you chose to establish your business among them, Sarah observed. Crawford's expression was unreadable. There's profit in necessity. The Cherokee need trade goods they can't produce themselves. I provide those goods. At fair prices, Sarah asked pointedly. Crawford's smile didn't reach his eyes. At market prices, adjusted for risk and transportation costs. On the 23rd day of their journey, they crested a ridge overlooking a broad valley where the newly established Cherokee settlements were taking shape. Sarah could see organized streets, substantial log structures, and agricultural fields being prepared for spring planting. It was far more developed than she had expected for a people so recently displaced. Tahlequah, Crawford said, gesturing toward the largest concentration of buildings, the new Cherokee capital. Our trading post is 2 miles north, closer to the river landing. As they descended toward the settlement, Sarah noticed increased tension in Crawford and his men. Their hands stayed close to their weapons, and their eyes constantly scanned the surrounding terrain. Are you expecting trouble? She asked Crawford quietly. Always, he replied. Particularly from, he never finished his sentence, from the trees lining the road. A group of mounted men emerged with practiced precision, effectively surrounding their small party. They were Cherokee warriors, armed with both traditional weapons and modern rifles. Crawford cursed under his breath, but raised his hands slowly to show he carried no weapon. His men followed suit, though Sarah could see the calculation in their eyes as they assessed their odds against superior numbers. The leader of the Cherokee group moved his horse forward. He was tall and powerfully built, with the disciplined posture of someone trained for command. Unlike the other warriors, who wore a mixture of traditional and adopted clothing, this man was dressed in the full regalia of a Cherokee war chief. His face was painted with red and black designs that emphasized his high cheekbones and strong jaw. Most striking were his eyes, dark and penetrating, missing nothing as they assessed the traders. Silas Crawford, he said, his deep voice carrying no trace of accent. You were warned not to return to Cherokee lands. Crawford forced a congenial smile. Chief Adahy, there seems to be some misunderstanding. I have all necessary trading permits from the Indian Agency. Your permits were revoked after you sold diseased blankets to our people last winter. Chief Adahy replied coldly. 23 children died. Or did you forget? Sarah felt sick at this revelation. She glanced at Crawford, whose expression confirmed the accusation. A regrettable incident, Crawford said smoothly. But those goods came from suppliers who misrepresented their quality. I've brought only clean merchandise this time, as a gesture of goodwill. Chief Addie's expression remained impassive. Your goodwill is not welcome here. You will turn back immediately. Crawford's facade of reasonableness slipped slightly. I have legitimate business interests in this territory property, inventory, accounts to settle. You have nothing here, the chief replied. Your trading post was seized by the Cherokee Council as compensation for the harm you caused. Your inventory was distributed to the families of those who died. Sarah watched Crawford's face darken. With anger and something else, fear. Without his trading post, the agreement for her service was meaningless. More importantly, whatever illegal activities he had planned were now impossible. This is tribal overreach, Crawford protested. I'll appeal to the federal Indian agent, who has approved our actions, Chief Addie interrupted. The documents were witnessed and recorded. You have no legal recourse. A tense silence fell over the group. Sarah could see Crawford weighing his options, none of which appeared promising. His men were outnumbered 3-1, and the Cherokee warriors were clearly prepared for resistance. What about my personal property? Crawford asked finally. I had account books, correspondence, items of significant value, everything was documented and stored, the chief replied. You may petition the council for the return of legitimate personal items from outside our territory. Crawford's eyes narrowed dangerously. And my debts? I have outstanding accounts with several tribal members. For the first time, Chief Addie smiled, though the expression held no warmth. Those have been reassigned to more honorable traders. Sarah realized with growing alarm that Crawford had lost everything: his trading post, his inventory, his business connections, which meant she was now attached to a man with no means to support himself, let alone honor any commitment to her welfare. Crawford seemed to reach the same conclusion. He turned to Sarah with calculating eyes that made her blood run cold. I still have one valuable asset, he said. This woman comes with significant skills: literacy, bookkeeping, even knowledge of Cherokee language and customs. Her contract of service should offset some of my losses. Sarah felt a surge of panic as she realized Crawford intended to sell her contract to recoup his losses. She was being treated as property to be traded again. Chief Addie's gaze shifted to Sarah, seeming to truly notice her for the first time. His dark eyes assessed her with the same penetrating intelligence he had directed at Crawford, but without the hostility. What is your name? He asked. Sarah Bennett, she replied, straightening her posture despite her fear. And what is the nature of your arrangement with Crawford? Sarah saw no benefit in concealing the truth. My father owed him $2,000. He offered my services for 5 years to settle the debt. The chief's expression darkened. Without your consent? Yes. Chief Addie turned back to Crawford with unconcealed disgust. You would trade in human beings? This practice is forbidden in Cherokee territory. It's a legitimate labor contract, Crawford insisted, recognized by territorial law and not by Cherokee law. The chief interrupted firmly. We do not recognize or enforce such arrangements. Crawford's desperation was becoming dangerous. She's my property until the debt is satisfied. If you won't honor the contract, you can buy it outright. Sarah watched Chief Addie's expression shift from disgust to something more complex: calculation, perhaps, or consideration of options she couldn't fathom. The Cherokee Nation does not purchase human beings, he stated firmly. However, I personally will settle the woman's contract. Sarah's breath caught. Was she simply being transferred from one owner to another? $2,000, Crawford said immediately, plus interest and transportation costs. The original debt only. Chief Addie countered. No interest, no additional costs. $2,000. Crawford recognized he had no leverage for negotiation. Cash or trade goods? Neither, the chief replied. I offer a blood debt settlement. A murmur ran through both groups at these words. Sarah didn't understand their significance, but she could see that Crawford did, and that it both surprised and disturbed him. A blood debt? Crawford repeated uncertainly. Between us personally? Chief Addie nodded solemnly. 3 winters ago, your illegal whiskey trading led to the death of my cousin. In a drunken dispute, the council acknowledged my right to seek compensation but advised patience for the greater good of the nation. I had nothing to do with that incident. Crawford protested, though his expression suggested otherwise. Your whiskey, your profits, your responsibility, the chief replied implacably. I claim this woman's contract as blood debt settlement, her freedom from my cousin's life. The Cherokee warriors nodded in approval, while Crawford's men shifted, uncomfortably, clearly understanding they were witnessing a significant cultural exchange. Crawford weighed his options visibly. He had no trading post, no inventory, and faced a blood debt claim from a powerful Cherokee leader. The woman's contract was his only remaining asset, but refusing the blood debt settlement would make his position among the Cherokee even more precarious. Fine, he said finally. The blood debt is settled with her contract, but I want written acknowledgement that all claims against me are resolved. Chief Adahy nodded to one of his men, who produced paper, ink, and quills from a saddlebag. The agreement was written in both English and Cherokee, signed by both men and witnessed by members of both parties. Throughout this exchange, Sarah remained silent, understanding that her fate was being decided, but uncertain of the implications. Was she now obligated to serve the Cherokee chief instead of Crawford? Or was she truly free, as the chief's words suggested? As the documents were completed, Chief Adahy turned to Sarah. Miss Bennett, you are no longer bound by any contract of service. You are free to go wherever you choose. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by practical concern. I have no money, no connections in this territory. How am I to return east? Before Chief Adahy could respond, Crawford and his men were already mounting their horses, clearly eager to depart before the situation changed. Crawford fixed Sarah with a final cold stare. You're the Cherokee's problem now, he said. Don't expect any assistance from me. As Crawford's party rode away, Sarah found herself alone among strangers in an unfamiliar territory, her future once again uncertain. She turned to Chief Adahy, trying to discern his intentions. Why did you do that? She asked directly. Why settle a blood debt for a woman you don't know? The chief studied her with those penetrating dark eyes. No person should be bound by another's debts, he said simply. My people have suffered too much from such injustices to perpetuate them. I'm grateful, Sarah said carefully, but I still don't know what happens to me now. Chief Adahy gestured toward Tehliqua. You mentioned skills literacy, bookkeeping, knowledge of our language and customs. Our nation is rebuilding after forced removal. We need all available talents, particularly from those who approach us with respect rather than exploitation. You're offering me employment? Sarah asked, hardly daring to believe such fortune. I'm offering you an opportunity, he corrected. The nation needs teachers, record keepers, and those who understand both Cherokee and white ways. Your mother counted our people as friends, you said. Perhaps you might honor her memory by helping us rebuild what was taken. Sarah felt a surge of emotion at the mention of her mother. Elizabeth Bennett would have seen this unexpected turn of events as providential an opportunity to continue her work of building understanding between cultures. I would be honored to help however I can, Sarah said sincerely. Chief Adahy nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Then come. There is much work to be done, and winter approaches quickly. As they rode toward Tehliqua, Sarah realized that what had begun as the darkest day of her life being traded to settle her father's debts had somehow led her to exactly where her mother's legacy might best be continued, among people who valued healing, knowledge, and cultural understanding. She might finally find the purpose that had eluded her since Elizabeth's death. What Sarah couldn't possibly know, as she followed Chief Adahy toward the Cherokee settlement, was that she had just taken the first step on a journey that would transform not only her own life, but the future of an entire nation struggling for survival in a hostile world. The skills she carried, her mother's medical knowledge, her own determination, and her ability to move between worlds would soon become more valuable than anyone could have imagined. The Cherokee settlement of Tehliqua spread before Sarah, like a vision of determined resilience, nestled in a valley protected by rolling hills. The nascent capital of the Cherokee Nation stood as testament to a people's refusal to be erased. Log structures in neat rows formed the beginnings of a street grid, while the central council house larger and more imposing than the surrounding buildings. demonstrated clear architectural planning. Smoke rose from cooking fires as families prepared evening meals, and children played in the spaces between buildings, their laughter a defiant sound in a place born of tremendous suffering. As their party rode toward the settlement, Sarah noticed curious glances from the residents. Some expressions were openly hostile upon seeing a white woman accompanying their chief, while others showed cautious interest. She straightened her posture, determined to face whatever reception awaited with the dignity her mother would have expected. "Our people have reason to distrust white faces," Chief Adahy said quietly. Noticing her reaction to the stares, "Every promise made to us was broken, every treaty violated. The journey here claimed the lives of our elders. Our children over 4,000 souls lost to satisfy white greed for our ancestral lands." "I understand their distrust," Sarah replied, "and I don't expect immediate acceptance." Adahy studied her with those penetrating eyes. "Yet you choose to stay among us rather than seek passage back east." "My mother believed in building bridges between our peoples," Sarah said simply. "I can think of no better way to honor her memory than by offering whatever skills I possess to help rebuild what was taken from you." Something in Adahy's expression softened slightly. "Noble sentiments. We shall see if they withstand the realities of life here." They dismounted at a modest cabin near the council house. Unlike the rougher structures surrounding it, this building showed signs of careful craftsmanship: tight-fitting logs, a proper stone chimney, and glass windows that must have been transported at considerable expense from eastern settlements. "The nation's administrative center," Adahy explained. "Our new government is structured much like the one we established in our eastern homeland. Principal chief, council of representatives, courts of law. We are determined to demonstrate our civilization to a government that labeled us savages to justify taking our lands." Inside, several men were gathered around a large table covered with maps and documents. They looked up as Adahy entered, their expressions shifting from concentration to surprise when Sarah followed. "Gentlemen," Adahy addressed them in Cherokee, then switched to English for Sarah's benefit. "This is Sarah Bennett. She has skills in record-keeping, language, and medicine that may be useful to our rebuilding efforts. Miss Bennett, these are members of our executive council." Sarah nodded respectfully to the assembled men, noting their formal attire a mixture of traditional Cherokee clothing and adopted European styles that reflected their transitional position between worlds. An older man with silver-streaked hair stepped forward, studying Sarah with undisguised skepticism. "Chief Adahy, bringing a white woman into our administrative council seems unwise. Given recent experiences, Miss Bennett's situation is unique." "Councillor Degadoga," Adahy replied. "She was being transported here against her will. Her services traded to settle a debt. I intervened and offered her opportunity instead of bondage." The councillor's expression remained dubious, and she simply agreed to assist the very people most whites consider beneath contempt. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "My mother was a healer who studied with Cherokee medicine women. She taught me that wisdom knows no racial boundaries, Counselor. I was raised to respect your people's knowledge and traditions." "Pretty words," Degadoga replied, "but we've heard many pretty words from white mouths before." He turned to Adahy. "What exactly do you propose, Chief?" "A 3-month trial," Adahy said. "Miss Bennett will assist with our English correspondence, help organize our administrative records, and perhaps offer her medical knowledge where needed. After 3 months, the council can evaluate her contributions and decide whether to extend the arrangement." The councilors exchanged glances, clearly having reservations, but unwilling to directly challenge their chief's decision. Eventually, Degadoga nodded reluctantly. 3 months, he agreed, "but she remains your responsibility. Chief Adahy, any problems arising from her presence will reflect on your judgment." "Understood," Adahy replied with the confidence of a man accustomed to bearing heavy responsibilities. He turned to Sarah. "You'll begin tomorrow. For tonight, arrangements have been made for your accommodation." Sarah followed Adahy back outside, where a young Cherokee woman awaited them. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with intelligent eyes and a guarded expression. "This is Aida," Adahy said. "She will show you to your lodgings and help you understand our community's customs." Sarah felt a jolt of recognition at the name Aida. My mother's closest friend among the Cherokee was named Aida. She was a medicine woman who taught my mother about healing plants. The young woman's expression showed surprise. Aida is not an uncommon name among our people, she said in perfect English. It means first to dance. But my grandmother was a medicine woman who remained in the East. When most of our people were forced west, we never knew what became of her. My mother's friend lived near Charleston, Sarah said, hope rising in her chest. She disappeared shortly before the removals began. We feared she had been captured by soldiers. Aida and Adahi exchanged meaningful glances. What was your mother's name? Aida asked. Elizabeth Bennett. Aida's composed expression cracked slightly. My grandmother spoke often of a white woman healer named Elizabeth who treated our people with respect when others showed only contempt. She gave my grandmother an English book about plants as a gift. A green leather volume with gold lettering, Sarah said, hardly daring to believe the connection. Culper's Complete Herbal. Aida's eyes widened. You know of it? My mother commissioned a second copy for herself. I still have her version in my belongings. For the first time since her arrival, Sarah saw genuine warmth in the expressions directed toward her. This unexpected connection to Aida's grandmother had transformed her from suspicious outsider to someone with a meaningful link to their past. It seems the spirits have guided your path to us for reasons beyond chance. Adahi said thoughtfully, come, Aida will show you where you'll stay. Tomorrow is soon enough to begin our work. Aida led Sarah to a small cabin on the settlement's edge, a single room with basic furnishings, but clean and solid against the approaching winter. As they walked, Aida's initial reserve gradually softened. You must understand our caution, she explained. Those who survived the removal have deep wounds, not just physical suffering, but the knowledge that a government claiming Christian virtue could force thousands of civilized, educated people from their homes at bayonet point. I can't imagine such betrayal, Sarah admitted. Though my family suffered ostracism for opposing the removal, my father's business was boycotted because he traded fairly with Cherokee customers. Yet your father eventually traded you to settle his debts, Aida observed with quiet directness. Sarah flinched at the painful truth. My father, after my mother's death, was not the same man who raised me. Grief and desperation changed him. Though that doesn't excuse his actions. Aida's expression softened further. Forgive my bluntness. We've learned to speak directly after seeing how easily white men's words can hide their true intentions. I prefer honesty, Sarah assured her, and I don't expect special treatment or immediate trust. I'm here to work, to contribute whatever skills I have to your rebuilding efforts. When they reached the cabin, Aida helped Sarah settle her few possessions. As Sarah unpacked her mother's medical journal, Aida watched with evident interest. Those are healing plants, she asked, glancing at the careful illustrations. Yes, my mother's records of treatments combining European and Cherokee knowledge. Sarah hesitated, then offered the book to Aida. Would you like to see it? Aida accepted the journal with reverent hands, turning pages slowly and studying the detailed notes and drawings. This knowledge, much was lost in the removal. Our oldest medicine people died on the journey west. Their wisdom went with them. My mother believed that healing transcends cultural boundaries, Sarah said. She would want this knowledge preserved and shared. Aida returned the journal carefully. Perhaps tomorrow you might show this to our remaining healers. They would value such records greatly. After Aida left, Sarah sat alone in the small cabin, trying to process the extraordinary turns her life had taken. A week ago, she had been managing her father's failing store, dreading his return from each increasingly desperate trading venture. Now she found herself in the newly established Cherokee Nation, connected through her mother's legacy to people, rebuilding their entire civilization after catastrophic displacement. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had been traded like property, only to find herself in a community fighting to recover from being treated as dispensable by the American government. Perhaps her unexpected journey wasn't random chance, but something more meaningful, an opportunity to contribute to healing wounds that extended far beyond physical injuries. As darkness fell, Sarah lit the cabin's single lamp and opened her mother's journal, drawing strength from Elizabeth's careful handwriting and clear-eyed observations. Whatever challenges awaited in this new life, she would face them with the same compassion and determination that had guided her mother's work. The following morning brought Sarah's first day of official duties. She arrived at the administrative building at sunrise, determined to make a positive impression. Inside, she found Counselor Degadoga already working, his skeptical expression suggesting he expected her to abandon her commitment. At the first opportunity, Miss Bennett, he acknowledged stiffly. Chief Adahy left instructions regarding your assignments. These documents require organizing by date and subject matter. He gestured toward several stacks of papers, correspondence, treaties, and official notices from the U.S. government. Sarah assessed the disorganized collection. Recognizing the opportunity it presented, "I'll establish a filing system that makes retrieval more efficient," she offered. "My father's business required similar organization." Degadoga watched her with guarded interest as she began sorting the documents methodically. "You understand this is sensitive material concerning our nation's future," he said after observing her work for several minutes. "Documents that could be valuable to those who wish us further harm." Sarah met his gaze directly. "Counselor, I have no allegiance to those who perpetrated crimes against your people. I'm here because I believe in justice and healing, not further exploitation." "Noble sentiments," he replied, echoing Adahy's words from the previous day. "But sentiments rarely withstand the test of conflicting loyalties. Time will reveal your true character, Miss Bennett." Sarah accepted his challenge with a nod. "I welcome that test, Counselor." Actions speak more truthfully than words. As the day progressed, Sarah established a comprehensive organizational system. For the nation's records, she created separate files for governmental correspondence, internal council matters, and pending issues requiring attention. By mid-afternoon, she had transformed chaos into retrievable information, a small but meaningful contribution to the nation's rebuilding efforts. When Chief Adahy arrived to review her progress, she detected genuine approval in his usually guarded expression. "Riders from the western border have reported white settlers encroaching on Cherokee lands," she said urgently. "They've established at least 3 homesteads on territory clearly designated as ours in the treaty maps." Sarah approached Adahy's home with a curious blend of anticipation and nervousness that evening. She had selected her most presentable dress, a modest blue cotton that Aida had helped her alter to better fit her frame, and wore her mother's cameo brooch, a small connection to her past as she contemplated an uncertain future. Adahy's dwelling reflected his position in the community, larger than most, but still modest by white standards. The front room combined traditional Cherokee design elements with practical furniture, creating a space that honored heritage while addressing present needs. A fire burned in the central hearth, illuminating polished wooden surfaces and carefully arranged practical items. "Welcome," Adahy said, greeting her at the door with uncharacteristic informality. Without his usual ceremonial attire, dressed instead in a simple white shirt and dark trousers, he seemed both more approachable and somehow more vulnerable. The meal he had prepared was simple but thoughtfully presented: venison stew with cornbread and early spring greens. They ate at a small table near the fire, their conversation initially focusing on familiar topics: delegation preparations, administrative arrangements, ongoing community projects. As they finished eating, however, the careful distance they had maintained began to dissolve. Adahy rose to add wood to the fire, then turned to face Sarah with an expression of rare openness. "When I claimed your contract through blood debt that day on the road," he began, "I acted from multiple motivations. I saw a practical opportunity to acquire skills our nation needed. I recognized a chance to thwart Crawford, whose trading had harmed our people. But there was something else, something I've been reluctant to acknowledge even to myself." Sarah felt her heart quicken at his words. "What else motivated you?" "In that moment when our eyes first met, I recognized something I hadn't expected to find in a white woman being transported against her will." Adahy moved closer, his voice dropping slightly. "I saw strength beneath fear, dignity despite humiliation, and a spirit that refused to be broken by circumstances. It resonated with what our people have endured." The admission revealed layers to his initial decision that Sarah hadn't fully understood. You saw parallels between my situation and your nation's. Yes, but more than that. Adahi's expression reflected internal struggle, a man accustomed to guarding his thoughts. Now choosing vulnerability. I saw someone I wanted to know, beyond whatever practical contributions you might make. That recognition disturbed me. As chief, my focus must remain on our people's welfare, not personal inclinations. Sarah understood the conflict he described. Leaders carried responsibilities that necessarily constrained personal desires, particularly in communities facing existential threats. Yet the connection growing between them seemed increasingly significant to them both. These past months, she said carefully, I've found myself equally conflicted. My gratitude for your intervention has evolved into something far more complex: admiration for your leadership, respect for your commitment to your people, and feelings I've hesitated to examine too closely given our different positions and backgrounds. Adahi moved to sit beside her, close enough that she could sense his warmth, yet still maintaining respectful distance. The Washington delegation departs in 3 days. I may be absent for months, negotiating with officials who view our very existence as inconvenient to their expansionist ambitions. Before leaving, I needed clarity between us, acknowledgement of what has developed, even if circumstances prevent us from exploring its full meaning. What are you saying, exactly? Sarah asked, needing directness despite the delicacy of the moment. Adahi met her gaze with unflinching honesty. That I have developed feelings for you beyond respect or professional regard. That I find myself thinking of you in moments when my mind should be occupied with nation business. That I question whether such feelings can or should be acted upon, given the complexities of our positions. The admission hung between them, both liberating and complicating. Sarah felt simultaneous relief at the confirmation of what she had sensed and uncertainty about what such acknowledgement meant for their future. I share those feelings, she confessed quietly, and the same questions about their practicality. Your first responsibility must be to your people. My position here remains precarious, a white woman in Indian territory, dependent on tribal protection. The barriers seem formidable, yet not insurmountable, Adahi replied, tentatively reaching for her hand. Our nations have histories of intermarriage despite conflicts between their governments. Many influential Cherokee families include both lineages. The word marriage hung unspoken but unmistakable between them. Sarah felt its weight, the enormity of what they were approaching through this careful conversation. Before anything more develops between us, Adahi continued, there are truths you should understand about what connection to me would mean. As chief, my life belongs first to my people. Their needs supersede personal considerations. Any woman who stands beside me must accept that priority without resentment. I would expect nothing less, Sarah replied sincerely. Leadership carries obligations that transcend personal desire. I've seen how completely you embody that responsibility. There would also be opposition, he warned. Some council members, despite respecting your contributions, would question a deeper connection between us. Some community members would view it as inappropriate, diluting Cherokee leadership at a time when cultural preservation remains essential to our survival. Sarah nodded. Having already considered these barriers, and in the wider world, such a relationship would face even greater resistance. White society views Indian white marriages with deep suspicion, particularly when the woman is white. We would belong fully in neither world. Perhaps that is precisely the strength such a union might offer, Adahi suggested. Standing between worlds, building understanding where others see only division, demonstrating that connection remains possible despite generations of conflict. The idealism in his words touched Sarah deeply. Despite everything he had witnessed, his people's forced removal, continuous treaty violations, persistent threats to Cherokee sovereignty, Adahi maintained hope that bridges between cultures remain possible. That hope reflected his fundamental character: pragmatic without surrendering to cynicism, realistic without abandoning vision. I should be clear, he added, his fingers tightening slightly around hers. I'm not proposing immediate marriage. Our acquaintance, though intense through shared challenges, remains relatively brief. But I wanted honesty between us before my departure, acknowledgement of possibilities worth exploring. When circumstances allow, "I appreciate that honesty," Sarah replied, "and I share your belief that what has grown between us deserves consideration." Despite the obvious challenges, the conversation that followed explored those challenges with unflinching directness: the political implications within the Cherokee community, the potential reactions from white authorities, already suspicious of Sarah's presence, the practical considerations of building a life together amid continuous struggles for basic sovereignty. As evening deepened outside, they moved gradually from theoretical discussion to more personal revelation, sharing childhood memories, formative experiences, beliefs that guided their decisions. Sarah described her mother's friendship with Cherokee healers and how that relationship had shaped her understanding of medicine as cultural exchange rather than hierarchical knowledge. Adahy spoke of his education in mission schools, where he had mastered English and American legal concepts, while experiencing firsthand the condescension embedded in even well-intentioned white institutions. When Sarah finally rose to leave, their conversation had established new understanding, neither committing to specific outcomes, but acknowledging shared feelings worth exploring further. After Adahy's return from Washington, at the door, he took both her hands in his, the gesture conveying more than words could express. "Whatever develops between us," he said quietly, "know that your presence here has already changed our nation for the better. Your skills, your adaptability, your willingness to learn, rather than impose these qualities, have strengthened our rebuilding efforts in measurable ways." "This place has changed me equally," Sarah replied. "I arrived desperate and uncertain, defined by my father's failures and society's limitations. Here I've found purpose that aligns with my deepest values, work that matters, community that supports genuine contribution, and connection that transcends cultural boundaries." Their parting remained formally restrained, a gentle pressure of hands rather than more demonstrative gesture, yet carried emotional significance that both clearly felt. As Sarah walked back to her cabin through the spring evening, she understood that regardless of what might develop between them romantically, her commitment to the Cherokee Nation's welfare had become fundamental to her identity. What began as circumstantial alliance had evolved into deliberate choice that would shape her future, regardless of personal outcomes. The Washington delegation departed 3 days later with ceremonial prayers and community gathering to witness their journey. 8 representatives would accompany Adahy council members, respected elders, and a Cherokee attorney educated in American law, who would help navigate the complex legal negotiations ahead. As the group prepared to depart, Adahy addressed the gathered community with characteristic dignity and strategic optimism. "We travel to remind the United States government of its legal obligations under treaties they themselves drafted and signed. We do not go as supplicants but as representatives of a sovereign nation seeking justice already promised but not delivered." Sarah stood among the community members, watching as Adahy transformed from the more personally accessible man of their private conversation into the formal embodiment of Cherokee leadership. The transition revealed another dimension of his character: the ability to subordinate personal considerations to the ceremonial requirements of his position. Before mounting his horse, Adahy moved through the crowd, speaking briefly with various community members. When he reached Sarah, their exchange remained appropriately professional, despite the meaningful conversation they had shared days earlier. "The administrative systems are prepared for your absence," she reported. "Counselor Degadoga will oversee daily governance while I'll manage correspondence and documentation as we discussed. Your organizational skills have become essential to our operations," Adahy replied, his formal tone belied by the warmth in his eyes. "The nation is fortunate to have your commitment during this transition." Only the slight lingering of his hand near hers suggested deeper connection beneath their public interaction, a momentary acknowledgement of private understanding amid their official roles. As the delegation rode away, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Beyond her administrative duties, she understood that her position as a white woman trusted with nation business carried symbolic significance. Her performance during Adahy's absence would either reinforce or undermine the trust he had placed in her, with implications extending beyond personal reputation to broader questions about cross-cultural cooperation. The weeks following the delegation's departure brought unexpected challenges that tested Sarah's adaptability and leadership. Spring rains swelled rivers beyond their banks, washing out newly planted fields in several outlying settlements. Territorial officials increased pressure regarding boundary disputes, sending increasingly threatening correspondence about the encroaching white settlers. The Cherokee had diplomatically asked to relocate. Most concerning, rumors began circulating about Crawford's return to the region. Sarah worked closely with Counselor Degadoga to address these challenges, drawing on the administrative systems she had established while adapting to rapidly changing circumstances. Her position remained delicate, offering guidance and information, while respecting the council's ultimate authority in Addie's absence. Crawford's return represents significant threat, Degadoga stated during one council session. His previous trading violations were minor compared to potential alignment with railroad interests. Their financial resources and political connections far exceed anything we've confronted previously. Sarah nodded in agreement. The territorial correspondence I've been cataloging shows increased references to development necessities and transit corridors. Through what they carefully avoid identifying as Cherokee land, the language suggests coordinated strategy rather than isolated pressure. Her analysis proved accurate. 3 weeks after the delegation's departure, official representatives from the Transcontinental Railroad Company arrived in Tahlequah, requesting courtesy consultation regarding proposed routes. Their carefully worded communications emphasized economic benefits, while downplaying the fundamental sovereignty violation their plans represented. When the council refused immediate discussion without Chief Addie's presence, the representatives revealed their actual leverage federal authorization to survey potential routes, regardless of tribal consent, supported by military escort if necessary. This is direct treaty violation, Counselor Degadoga declared during emergency session. The removal agreement explicitly guaranteed territorial integrity against such incursions. Without negotiated agreement, Sarah, reviewing the relevant documents, identified critical provisions. Article 6 specifically prohibits unauthorized transit development through nation territory without council approval and appropriate compensation. Their federal authorization contradicts treaty guarantees they're legally obligated to honor. The council's unified rejection of unauthorized surveys temporarily delayed railroad activity, but everyone understood the reprieve would prove temporary. Without Addie's diplomatic skills and connections in Washington, their position remained vulnerable to escalating pressure. These external threats coincided with internal challenges that required Sarah's medical knowledge. Unseasonably heavy rains created perfect conditions for waterborne illness in several communities. With inadequate drainage, working with Aida and other Cherokee healers, Sarah organized treatment protocols and sanitation improvements that gradually contained the spreading sickness. During these weeks of constant activity and mounting pressure, communication from the Washington delegation arrived irregularly. Brief dispatches described procedural delays, bureaucratic obstacles, and the frustrating pattern of officials expressing sympathy while deferring substantive action. Reading between carefully worded lines, Sarah recognized the delegation was encountering systematic resistance, masked by procedural politeness. 2 months into Addie's absence, as spring yielded to early summer heat, the situation escalated dramatically. A contingent of territorial militia accompanied railroad surveyors onto Cherokee land, despite continued council objections. When Cherokee representatives attempted peaceful intervention, showing treaty documentation prohibiting unauthorized entry, the militia commander threatened arrest for interference with federal projects. The confrontation stopped short of physical violence, but established dangerous precedent. The surveyors completed their work under armed protection, marking potential routes directly through agricultural lands essential to several Cherokee communities' subsistence. That evening, an emergency council session stretched late into the night as members debated appropriate response. Options ranged from formal diplomatic protest to organized resistance, each carrying significant risks given the power imbalance between Cherokee resources and federal military capability. If we allow this violation without resistance, we invite further encroachment, argued one counselor. Yet direct confrontation risks military response we cannot withstand. Sarah, who had been invited to provide documentation of previous treaty interpretations, listened carefully to the debate. The situation crystallized the fundamental paradox of the Cherokee position, legally justified in defending sovereign territory, but practically constrained by overwhelming military disadvantage. When asked her perspective, she spoke carefully. The pattern in territorial disputes suggests military confrontation serves their interests, not ours. Each conflict, regardless of legal justification, becomes pretext for increased restrictions on Cherokee sovereignty. So we simply surrender our rights? Asked a younger counselor with evident frustration. Not surrender, Sarah clarified. Strategic defense through documentation, witnesses, and carefully managed diplomacy. Build the historical record of violations while avoiding provocations they can use to justify military action. Her approach, though unsatisfying to those seeking more direct resistance, aligned with the Council's eventual decision: comprehensive documentation of treaty violations, formal protests through multiple channels, and controlled nonviolent presence at survey sites to witness and record activities without direct interference. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's organizational systems proved invaluable as the nation implemented this strategy. She developed templates for recording incursions, standardized witness statements, and coordinated documentation between communities to create comprehensive evidence of systematic treaty violations. This careful approach yielded unexpected opportunity. When a sympathetic journalist from an eastern newspaper visited Tahlequah, seeking perspective on Western expansion, Sarah provided meticulously organized evidence of treaty violations, systematic patterns of encroachment, and the stark contrast between legal guarantees and practical reality. The resulting series of articles published in several major newspapers presented Cherokee grievances to wider audience than previous advocacy had reached. While federal policy remained unchanged, public awareness created additional pressure on officials to at least maintain appearances of proper procedure rather than naked coercion. During this period of external pressure and internal adaptation, Sarah's position in the community continued evolving. What began as reluctant acceptance had transformed through crisis response into genuine integration. She was no longer viewed primarily as an unusual white presence, but as a committed contributor whose skills and perspective strengthened collective efforts. This transformation became evident one evening when Sarah attended a community gathering celebrating children's educational achievements. As she watched students demonstrate knowledge combining traditional Cherokee wisdom with practical skills needed for contemporary challenges, an elderly woman approached her with quiet dignity. "You were watching my granddaughter," the woman said, indicating a girl of about 12 who had presented a project combining plant identification with written documentation. "She tells me you've been teaching record-keeping systems in her class. She's remarkably quick to understand organizational principles," Sarah replied. Her bilingual abilities give her unique advantages in documentation work. The older woman nodded thoughtfully. "When you first came among us, I told my family to keep distance. White women bring white values that weaken our traditions. I believed you would leave once you understood the difficulties we face." Sarah accepted this assessment without defensiveness. "Your caution was reasonable given historical experience. Yet here you remain," the elder continued, "not attempting to change our ways, but contributing skills that strengthen our position. My granddaughter says you listen more than you speak in classroom. This is not typical of white teachers we have known." The observation touched Sarah deeply. "My mother taught me that wisdom begins with recognizing how much we don't know." The Cherokee educational approach, learning through observation before action, aligns with her philosophy. "Your mother taught wisdom unusual among your people," the elder replied. "Perhaps this explains why you find place among ours when others could not." This conversation represented dozens of similar interactions that gradually transformed Sarah's status from tolerated outsider to respected community member. Her consistent priorities supporting Cherokee self-determination rather than imposing external values had gradually earned trust that initial goodwill alone could never have secured. For months after the delegation's departure, As summer heat intensified and railroad survey crews continued work, despite ongoing Cherokee objections, a messenger arrived from Washington with unexpected news. The delegation was returning not with comprehensive resolution to their grievances, but with temporary protective measures negotiated through Addie's strategic diplomacy. They reached agreement postponing railroad development pending formal review of treaty provisions. The messenger reported to assembled council members. Chief Addie convinced several influential senators that proper procedure requires tribal consultation before implementation. It's delay rather than victory, but creates breathing space for more substantive negotiation. Sarah felt overwhelming relief at news of the delegation's imminent return, though she carefully maintained professional demeanor during the council briefing. Beyond administrative considerations, she had missed Addie's steadying presence, strategic thinking, and the personal connection they had begun exploring before his departure. The delegation's return 3 days later brought community celebration ceremonial welcome for leaders who had represented nation interests in distant hostile territory. Sarah watched from appropriate distance as Addie completed necessary formal interactions, noting subtle changes in his appearance. The nation's needs necessarily took precedence over personal considerations, a priority she not only accepted but respected as fundamental to Addie's character and leadership. I've prepared summary reports of all significant developments during your absence, she said, returning temporarily to administrative matters, organized by category with supporting documentation as we discussed before your departure. The brief return to professional focus provided comfortable transition as they concluded their evening meeting. As they prepared to leave the council building, however, Addie paused at the door, turning to face Sarah with renewed personal directness. Would you consider joining me for evening meal tomorrow? At my home rather than here, after council obligations are addressed for the day. The invitation represented deliberate continuation of what they had begun exploring before his departure, acknowledgement that their connection deserved dedicated attention beyond professional interaction. I would be honored, Sarah replied simply. As they walked together through the summer evening toward their respective dwellings, their conversation returned to community matters, the children's educational progress, improvements to the medical facility, promising agricultural developments. Yet beneath this comfortable discussion flowed deeper currents both recognized, but neither needed to articulate directly. The woman who had been traded to settle a debt and the warrior who had claimed her through ancient custom had each found unexpected transformation through their encounter. What began as transaction had evolved into connection, transcending cultural boundaries and historical divisions. Whatever challenges lay ahead, both personal and political, they would face them with shared commitment to possibilities neither could have imagined. When their paths first crossed on that fateful road, in the days that followed, as the Cherokee Nation mobilized to address immediate railroad threats while building longer-term defensive strategies, Sarah and Addie established new patterns of interaction balancing professional collaboration with gradually deepening personal connection. Their respective roles remained priority, yet they created space for relationship development through shared meals, evening conversations, and carefully managed public appearances that respected community expectations while acknowledging their growing bond. The obstacles remained formidable: external pressure from territorial authorities, railroad interests, and federal officials; internal questions from community members concerned about cultural preservation; practical challenges of building relationship amid continuous crisis management. Yet they discovered that facing these challenges together strengthened, rather than diminished, their connection. 3 months after Addie's return, as summer heat yielded to early autumn coolness, the council faced crucial decision regarding railroad development. Federal authorities had presented compromise proposal offering financial compensation and limited route adjustments in exchange for Cherokee acceptance of transcontinental railway through their territory. The debate divided council members between pragmatic acceptance of inevitable development and principled resistance to further sovereignty erosion. Throughout extended deliberations, Sarah provided comprehensive documentation of similar compromises from other tribal nations, revealing patterns of initial restriction, followed by continuous expansion once access was established. when final decision fell to Adahy as principal chief, he balanced multiple considerations: practical realities of federal power, community needs for economic development, fundamental importance of maintaining territorial integrity. His eventual response represented strategic compromise, protecting essential sovereignty, while acknowledging development inevitability requiring comprehensive environmental assessment, significant route modification to avoid sacred sites and key agricultural lands, substantially increased compensation, and legally binding limitations on future expansion. The negotiated agreement represented neither complete victory nor devastating defeat, but practical protection of core interests amid challenging circumstances. As implementation began, Sarah's administrative systems proved crucial for monitoring compliance, documenting violations, and maintaining institutional memory that prevented gradual erosion of agreed protections. Throughout these challenges, her position in the community continued evolving from initially tolerated outsider to essential contributor. The skills she had brought, organizational systems, medical knowledge, cross-cultural understanding, had strengthened Cherokee capacity to navigate external pressures while maintaining internal cohesion. Most significantly, her relationship with Adahy developed beyond professional collaboration into partnership that community gradually acknowledged and accepted. Their connection faced expected resistance: concerns about cultural dilution, questions about divided loyalties, practical challenges of cross-cultural relationship amid continuous external pressure. Yet their consistent prioritization of community welfare above personal consideration gradually earned acceptance from even initially skeptical observers. One autumn evening, as they walked together along River Path following particularly challenging council session, Adahy stopped at Overlook, providing vista across the developing Cherokee settlement. Buildings now stood where temporary shelters had dominated months earlier. Fields showed evidence of successful harvest. Children played in spaces between structures with energy that defied historical trauma. When our people were forced from ancestral lands, many believed we faced cultural extinction. Adahy said quietly, the removal was designed not just to take territory, but to break spirit, to demonstrate that resistance against American expansion ultimately proved futile. Sarah nodded, having heard similar assessment from community elders. Yet here stands evidence of extraordinary resilience, rebuilding not just physical infrastructure, but cultural foundations and governmental systems. The greatest resistance to oppression is continued existence, Adahy agreed. Not just surviving physically, but maintaining identity, adapting traditions to new circumstances without surrendering essential values. He turned toward her, taking both her hands in characteristic gesture that had become significant between them. Your presence here represents something I couldn't have anticipated when claiming your contract that day on the road bridge between worlds, demonstrating connection remains possible despite generations of conflict. What began as transaction has become transformation, Sarah acknowledged, for both of us individually and perhaps in small way for relations between our peoples. As autumn deepened toward winter, their relationship formalized through Cherokee ceremony, combining traditional elements with adaptations reflecting their unique circumstances. Community participation reflected growing acceptance of their union as representing not cultural dilution, but potential strengthening, combining Cherokee resilience with additional skills and perspective that enhanced collective capacity. The woman who had been traded to settle a father's debt had found not just personal liberation, but meaningful purpose, contributing to community fighting for fundamental sovereignty. The Cherokee warrior who had claimed her through ancient custom had discovered partnership, strengthening both personal resilience and leadership capacity. Together they faced continuing challenges that would test both their relationship and the Cherokee Nation's determination to maintain identity amid relentless pressure. Yet they approached these challenges with shared commitment to possibilities, demonstrated through their unlikely connection. That understanding across cultural boundaries remained possible. Even in most divided times, that transformation could emerge from circumstances neither would have chosen, and that healing could develop in unexpected places. When courage and openness transcended historical barriers, their story spread beyond Cherokee boundaries, unusual partnership defying conventional limitations and demonstrating possibility where others saw only division. For communities facing similar pressures throughout Indian Territory, their relationship represented small but significant hope. That different future remained possible, one where cultural identity persisted despite displacement, where adaptation strengthened rather than diminished traditional values, and where unexpected connections created resilience against forces seeking to eliminate indigenous sovereignty. What had begun as the darkest moment in Sarah Bennett's life, being traded to settle her father's debts, had transformed into journey neither she nor Adahy could have anticipated. The path ahead remained challenging, filled with external threats and internal complexities, yet they faced it together with shared commitment to building future that honored both their distinct heritages and the unexpected connection that had transformed them both. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.